These are what cinemas used to show, double bills, 2 films for the price of 1. They don't exist anymore, not in this format. On the very rare occasions you do see a double bill, it's usually a one-night thing only, usually promoting a sequel by releasing as a double bill the first 2 films in the franchise. Often, in the double bills of old, these films were unrelated in story, but they were tied together by some sort of theme, actor, style or genre. They were immensely popular back in the day, and once I explain them, you'll see why. You could get 2 films, an A picture, so called because it was the main attraction, and a B picture, oftentimes a cheaply produced imitator or re-release, all for one price. Sometimes you could even get a newsreel, a cartoon and an informative short film included in the price. This was an event and experience, 4 or 5 hours of entertainment for a low cost. But look what we have nowadays. $20 tickets to see 30 minutes of adverts and trailers along with one film. How did we get here? Why did the cinema double bill die? And should it be brought back? To understand why double bills became a thing, we need to go back 100 years. By the 1920s, the film industry was really taking off and bringing in millions of dollars to cinemas. With the advent of talkies, cinemas' appetites for films only increased. But then in 1929, the Depression hit, and all the people that had been visiting cinemas suddenly couldn't afford to spend money on just an hour and a half of entertainment. Back in those days, especially in America, most cinemas were owned by the actual studios themselves. They began attaching to the show extra content, something to hopefully draw audiences back in. An animated short, a newsreel, sometimes even a live act. This, to a degree, assisted in bringing back some audience members. It was mostly the independent cinemas that didn't have the luxury of being able to attach these extras to their showings that began to have the idea of simply selling 2 films for the price of 1. Take a first run A picture and attach it to an existing film, either in storage or something which the cinema wouldn't regularly show due to its poor quality or obscurity. As long as both films were made by the same company, they didn't mind because the ticket share would still go to them. These became popular, 2 films for the price of 1, and in an environment where people were struggling to get by, not only did it provide escapist entertainment for a few hours, it provided a warm space and a roof over their heads. This became common practice in America. It was a slightly different process for international audiences, but I'll go over that later. By the 1960s, the double bill had begun to fade in America. Why, you may ask? Well, there are several factors, but breaking it down for simplicity, television. By the 50s, many homes began to have a TV. Although TV turned out high quality programming, it needed lots of content throughout the day to fill out its programming schedules. The cheap, slocky, melodramatic style of B-movies made them a perfect product for TV. With more and more homes acquiring a TV, cinema audience numbers began to drop. There was less and less demand for a B-movie style production because they could get a similar product on television. Audiences began to care more about the A picture, the main attraction, and so studios simply began to drop the B movie or the second feature from their programming. It's not to say that the double bill didn't continue in some form or another. The double bill would be replaced by the double feature. 2 A pictures for the price of 1, mostly for afternoon performances when there were more seats to fill. Eventually, the double bill in America just faded away, mostly consigned to drive-ins and the so-called grindhouses, cinemas that specifically showed reruns or exploitation-style films. But with the advent of VHS and cable movie channels, even these began to decline. For international audiences, oftentimes it was left to cinemas themselves to decide what would be shown as the second feature. The A picture was the main attraction, usually a big Hollywood production. The second feature often catered specifically to the market of that country. For example, in Britain, carry-on films were often a second feature. They featured British humour, British actors, British situations that just didn't translate very well to audiences from other countries.
Did you have any weaknesses as a boy?
Well, I used to like pinching little girls' yo-yos.
With your back, I meant.
Oftentimes, prints of these second features could be bought by the cinema, usually cheaply if they weren't brand new, and then shown as often as they like. This is why so often cinemas made their own posters for double bills. Other cinemas weren't showing the exact programming they were, and it was left up to cinemas to promote what their double bill was. Double bills for international audiences lasted longer than they did in America. Whereas many homes in the 1950s in America had televisions, by the 1960s in Britain and in other European countries, televisions were still a rare thing, and there was still much demand for the double bill. It wasn't really until the 1980s in Britain that the double bill began to fade away. So that brings us nicely round to our question: why aren't double bills a thing anymore? Well, as I said, In the 50s, television pulled cinema audiences away from the big screen. By the 80s, with the emergence of VHS, even more people were pulled away from the big screen. Well, think about nowadays. There are even more ways than ever to watch a film other than at the cinema. DVDs, Blu-rays, 4Ks, digital home rental, digital purchasing and streaming. The double bill, an A picture and a B picture, is finished. The modern version of the B picture is now streaming service exclusives, again made up mostly of melodramatic or cheap productions. Perhaps the double feature, 2 A pictures for the price of one, could entice audiences back. Perhaps, but big distributors won't allow that to happen anymore. Do you think Disney would be willing to split the cinema take of Avatar: The Way of Water if they paired it with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever? No, because these films are huge by themselves. Why would they split the price of a ticket between these two films? How about something more mid-range in budget and box office expectations, say The Menu and The Banshees of Inisherin, both owned by parent company Disney again? Could they do well as a double feature? Well, for a start, that would never happen because Disney would want both of these films showing separately at the same time at the same price. But surely, by grouping them together as a double bill, more people would turn out and so the box office take for each film could be higher. Yes, there is that possibility, but audiences today, unless true cinemaphiles, really don't want to spend 5 or so hours in a cinema when there are so many other things taking up time in the modern world. It's not unreasonable at all to assume that a double bill of this nature could succeed, but it's also reasonable to equally assume that it wouldn't succeed. How about local cinemas being in charge of their own double bill, deciding what their local audience would like best to see? Most likely this will never be allowed to happen because rival companies do not want in any way, shape or form to be associated with a rival product. There is much more of a brand awareness these days. Only products specifically paired together by the studio themselves will be allowed to be screened as a double bill. What do you think? Do you think the double bill or double feature should come back? Why? Leave a quick comment below and explain. I hope you found this interesting. I gotta admit I found this a difficult video to make, but I hope you have learnt something from this. Think about subscribing. The Box Office Brit hopes to see you again very soon.